It's time for fantasy football rankings in 2023 and the all-important wide receiver position. Matt's got him 55 deep in his rankings. We'll talk through them, where are the tiers, and one of those star wide receivers coming up with a training camp injury on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL on all the socials. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Shout out to all the everydayers. Make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Matt, I referenced your fantasy wide receiver rankings in the open, that it was 55 deep. We're not going to go through every single one of these 55 names here, but I do want to find out what some of your favorite sleepers are that are deeper on the list. But we've got to start at the top at wide receiver, which on everybody's list is Justin Jefferson. And my question is he like we were talking about Patrick Mahomes with the quarterbacks? Does he belong just in a tier of his own, or is there a group of guys where you're like, yeah, okay, they're all right in that same tier?
I think he's clearly one. I mean, just the way he has started his career, target share, pure talent. I think their offense will be even better this year. Hasn't even hit his prime, which is frightening. But I wanted to take this quick opportunity because last week we had Scott Barrett on from fantasypoints.com. on the Locked On Dynasty show. He joined us, and they were unveiling this fantasy points data, unbelievable site that they have. And I just wanted to check it out before we hit this because you can sort on their database fantasy points per route run. You know, every time your guy runs a route, how many fantasy points did he get your team? And there's only two guys that are over 0.6. You know, I mean, so think about that. Every time A.J. Brown runs a route, he gets you 0.59 fantasy points. But there's two guys over 0.6, and that's Tyreek Hill at 0.65 and Cooper Kupp, who we're going to get to, at 0.66. So those guys were noticeably better than the pack last year, Kupp and Hill. So I understand, Chase, Hill, Kupp, if you prefer, but I think Jefferson's safer, ascending, and is my clear number one.
Okay, so interesting. We might know where the tier is. And, Justin Jefferson has gone crazy, but he still didn't have the season that Cooper Kupp had 2 years ago.
Right.
Unfortunately, the injury bug has bit Kupp, and it's bit him again. And he's number 5 on your list. So it goes 1 through 5. Justin Jefferson, 1 for you, Matt. Number 2 is Tyreek Hill. Number 3 is Jamar Chase. Number 4, Stephon Diggs. Number 5, Cooper Kupp. And it sounds like Jefferson, pretty clear 1 for you. And kind of splitting hairs on some of these other guys?
Yeah, and I think I would even lump Devontae Adams at 6 in that tier. But it's funny, even before Kupp was injured, I still had him 5, where most people seem to have him 2. And I get that. I mean, you referenced 2 years ago, but even before his injury, he was the most efficient fantasy producer at the position. So he strung together 27, 28 games in a row of just elite production. But I was a little afraid of him and Adams even before the Kupp injury because I don't trust Jimmy to stay healthy. I don't really trust Stafford to stay healthy. I don't know that either of those teams are going to be in it to win it in the playoff, in your fantasy playoffs when you need them most. Could they be in tank mode? I just don't expect very good years from the Rams and Raiders. So I sided against them. And then now this Kupp injury shows up and it scares me even more. I mean, they're such a volatile team to begin with.
And it's tough because bad years means you could throw the ball more coming from behind in a lot of games too. So that's always difficult, but bad quarterback play or injured quarterbacks is usually not a great combination for your fantasy wide receivers on those teams. And then with Kupp, now you have his injury again after injured year last year. He comes up lame in training camp with a hamstring injury that's somewhat severe. He was pulled from practice, got an MRI on it, and it looks like they're going to be very cautious with him, but they said potentially he could be back for, quote, scrimmages in a few weeks. Scrimmages happen next week, I think. So
yeah, right.
That's interesting. A few weeks and camp's over. Like a month from now, there's no more preseason games. You know what I mean? So
right. It's only 3. They're coming next week.
Right. And so the Rams receiving group not great at that point after Cooper Kupp. So that is a worry with Cooper Kupp. But one thing I do love about Kupp and why, if I thought he was going to be 100% all year, I'd have him very high, potentially number 2, is because that group that the Rams have and the target share that he will get, and seeing his last healthy season, how much he was targeted. Like the offense ran through Cooper Kupp for the Rams, and Devontae Adams will get that share as well. Not quite to the extent maybe that Cooper Kupp is featured in his offense. And then you look at Stephon Diggs and you look at Justin Jefferson, and they're just so far and ahead the number ones, whereas Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, they kind of have to share a little bit with some of the other guys, because they have other really good receivers in their lineup.
Yeah, great points. And again, to answer your first question, yes, we're splitting hairs. All these guys are awesome. They're all tremendous football players. Jefferson at 1 versus Adams at 6, I kind of find interesting, because I think they're the best 2 wide receivers on the planet right now. But, this is fantasy. This isn't real life.
Right.
Back to real life real quick. The Rams are so dependent on Stafford, Kupp, and Donald, and their collective age and injury history makes them maybe the most volatile team in the whole league.
And Cooper Kupp's older than you might think, and coming off a severe injury last year. And being an old guy myself, Matt, you could probably vouch for this. I'm hurting myself in new ways every single day, and it's amazing. You start hitting 30, forget 40, and you wake up with something new. And especially if you're trying to play a sport at this level, it's pretty nuts. The older you get, the more you realize, oh my gosh, what these guys are putting their body through day to day is kind of insane.
Yeah, you and I have been a little detached because I'm here in Latrobe, but a little birdie told me that you were injured by a carrot. Or numerous carrots.
It was the carrot injury. Look, I've been trying to stay active in my advanced age here. Playing softball once a week, go golfing. I went to the gym, did some working out. So, I was, put in a nice week last week. But ended the week on a Saturday, my buddy's house, shout out Josh, and up in the North Bay, California. And his neighbors have goats. So the goats come over and the kids want to feed them carrots. But, we decided to toss a couple carrots over the fence. And so no warm-ups. I'm just trying to go Pat Mahomes with these carrots. And then I wake up 2 days later and I'm like, man, did I tear my rotator cuff? What's going on here? So, old guys out there, don't go tossing carrots in light objects without warming up properly first.
So, as you know, I'm a little older than you, just recently turned 50, and this is what you have to look forward to. And I'm a lesser athlete than you, so maybe you hit 51, 52 till you get injured by throwing darts. I met my buddies out. It was over the winter, and the little light plastic bar darts, we played for like an hour. Okay, no big deal. Had some pitchers of beer, normal stuff. Go home. Next day, late in the day, the elbow, inside elbow, it's a little sore. Day after Tommy that,
John. You need that Tommy John, I think, Matt.
I know. The day after that, it's screaming. And then the day after that, I go see we get together again, see my buddy Billy Moe, and he's like, is your elbow bugging you? And I'm like, why would you ask me that? Yes, it is. He's like, that confirms it. We both have a dart injury.
Oh, no.
An hour throwing darts. Little plastic darts. And I even warmed up a little bit. Gave it one of these before I threw,
That's scary. And what's funny is a lot of this camp injuries we're seeing are the guys that are over the age of 30 right now.
Yeah. That's why this acclimation process actually exists. People kind of laugh at it like that's too safe, blah, blah, blah. No, you got to warm up to this stuff.
Luckily, it actually hasn't been that bad this year. We haven't had any super catastrophic injuries to big time stars that are ACLs out for the year. And so hopefully that does continue, and hopefully Kupp does come back strong and he'll be a top 5 wide receiver for your fantasy rankings. All right, we're going to get into the next tier of wide receivers and some of Matt's favorite sleepers as well for fantasy football in 2023 next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. At FanDuel right now, you can bet on tons of Major League Baseball. Get your first crack at Major League Baseball, actually, and you can get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose on that first bet at FanDuel. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from money line to over-unders to who you think is going to hit the first home run in a game. They got a parlay up right now for Orioles and Blue Jays Wednesday. Gunnar Henderson, 2 total bases. Bryant Mountcastle, 2 total bases. Anthony Santander and Adley Rutschman. All 4 of them get 2 total bases. That's a big-time parlay. Wager 10 to get a nearly $200 there. You're getting a plus 1,945 on that one. Tons of fun parlays. Build your own parlay, and of course, betting on tons of NFL football as well at FanDuel. There's no better place to bet on all the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, Matt. A.J. Brown. We ended on number 6 there, and Devontae Adams, and that's kind of A.J. Brown is in that tier of wide receiver for me, but he just has more competition in a run-first offense in Philadelphia, so he's probably the top of tier 2. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned he was just behind Kupp and Hill in fantasy points per route run, as was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yes, A.J. Brown to me is the top of like this next 6 or 7 guys, including his teammate, Devontae Smith, that are all very young, ranging from Garrett Wilson to CeeDee Lamb basically in age. So they're all young, maybe not in their prime, massive dynasty assets, tremendous talents, all pretty much in good situations. So again, that tier is sort of splitting hairs. That sort of starts with Brown and ends with his teammate Smith. And there's some really good quality guys in between.
Yeah, interesting. A lot of young stars. All these guys in this group, 7 to 13, which starts at A.J. Brown, then CeeDee Lamb 8. Garrett Wilson is 9 for you, right ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown at 10. I can't wait to see what it looks like with Garrett Wilson. If he builds that rapport with Aaron Rodgers, look out, because Garrett, and I've seen some highlight catches already in camp, although Garrett Wilson did come down with a little bit of a tweak, pretty minor injury in camp. Chris Olave at 11 after Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle 12, and then Devontae Smith at 13. And that is a solid group. Those are all wide receiver 1s, and then sort of the back half of the wide receiver 1 group. Now, I think you can get some wide receiver 1s a little bit later on, and this is a super interesting name, and that is at number 14 for you, which is kind of the top of tier 3, which is Calvin Ridley. And he's in a new spot. And man, he could really go crazy. I don't want to have to pay too high of a price for Calvin Ridley, but I feel like I want him on all of my fantasy teams. There was a clip of training camp that showed Zay Flowers running a route. Then it showed Calvin Ridley running the same route, and it looked like they sped up the tape. It just looked that different. And if he can be that guy he was earlier on in his career in Atlanta, if he can be that for Trevor Lawrence, look out.
Yeah, that's my thoughts too. Is I'm always hesitant this time of year to buy into the hype. All the videos that people are putting out there, but it's just been overwhelming with this guy. And Lawrence is absolutely ascending. I understand that he hasn't played in a while. That scares me. Could he look like Deshaun Watson when he came back to the Browns at the end of last year? That would be terrible, but it sure doesn't seem like that's the case from all reports. He's always been a great route runner, highly productive. He's still in his prime years as well. But this neighborhood, these 5 or so are all really, really good players that just have a little bit of a concern fantasy-wise. You know what I mean?
From being that, true wide receiver 1 player, they can do it for a week or 2, but then they have the weeks where they won't get as many targets or have as many points from you, where you don't count on them to be that wide receiver 1 for you every single week. And do you know what Calvin Ridley's ADP is right now? Because I would hope I would be able to get him in the 20s at wide receiver, and he plays up, a tier higher. Like this is where he maybe belongs, but I would think that I would be able to get him after some of the players like DK Metcalf on this list.
Maybe over Metcalf, who I'm a little lower on than others. Maybe over Higgins. Maybe over your boy Debo. But I can assure you, and I don't have his ADP in front of me, but I've done a lot of the best ball drafts. No way are you getting him in wide receiver 20 neighborhood.
Okay,
I mean,
so he's
the hype is strong. You're gonna have to pay
strong, and everyone's on him. Okay, maybe he won't be
Yeah.
on all my fantasy teams then, because everyone's thinking the exact same way with Calvin Ridley right now.
Absolutely.
He's 14. Number 15, Tyler Lockett. 16 is T. Higgins. Then you got DK Metcalf at 17, and an interesting one, Christian Watson at 18, who could enter that superstardom. He's got all the athleticism and physical ability. I don't know what to expect from his quarterback, Jordan Love, this year, but he's the clear number one in town in Green Bay. And he's a super interesting one where it's hard to rank him. You could see him going big, and you could see him kind of disappointing in year two as well.
Yeah, and I would get to him in a second, but for receiver information, I rely on Matt Harmon's reception perception a great deal. I mean, it's just one of my tools, and because I think he does the best job evaluating receivers out there. And I recently listened to a podcast of his, and he was asked, who are the 10 best wide receivers on the planet right now? Not fantasy. And he basically was torn at number 10 between Lockett and Terry McLaurin, who are just perennially underrated guys. And McLaurin's always been in a bad situation. But Lockett just shines year after year after year, and you can always get him a round or two cheaper than you should. So I just decided I'm going to put him where I think he belongs, not where I can get him. You know what I mean? Like, he outscores DK Metcalf. As for Watson, there's immense risk there. I mean, it's a small sample size. He was a raw route runner coming out of a small school. Big playability galore. I mean, I think the coaching staff trusts him. He absolutely gained Aaron Rodgers' trust. But that he could come back to earth. I mean, I get that. Like, his touchdowns per route run, I'm sure, are ungodly. You know, I mean, there is some regression there.
Interesting about Tyler Lockett. He's like the reverse hype sleeper.
Right. Every time.
He's not hyped up on any list. But he's right there behind Calvin Ridley on your list. And yeah, at the end of the day, he's going to be awesome. He's going to be the same guy he's been for 10 years.
Absolutely. He'll end up as the wide receiver 12 like he does every year. A couple games he'll blow up with a 50-yarder or so. People look at him like he's Deshaun Jackson, but he doesn't have the games where he catches 2 for 28. I mean, he's a chain mover. He does everything well. And it's funny, I reference the Locked On Dynasty podcast. What we're doing this week is, if you want to buy a veteran in Dynasty to win now, you know, like, I'm going to give some draft picks up for a dude to win now. And we both came up with blind lists, and Ryan and I both, their favorite guy was Tyler Lockett. Like, you can get him way too cheap. Like, no one respects this guy nearly enough.
The other thing that affects Metcalf and Tyler Lockett both is now there's a young stud first round pick in the mix. And so Jackson Smith-Njigba might take some of those quick targets away from someone like Tyler Lockett, those slot, you know, the heavy production slot, easy that you could count on from Lockett in the past. You might not get those. So that's an interesting wide receiver group that I don't really know what to expect. And it's a team that runs the ball a lot. And Geno Smith, is he going to slump after his breakout year last year? Wasn't as good in the second half. So Seattle's I'm at arm's length with Seattle a little bit, even though I like all those guys a lot.
Yeah, I hear you, because I think I want to buy the offense. I think the offense has a chance to be very good this year. But, how big are the slices of pie for everyone to eat? And real quick, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on the show, but last year, the Seahawks, I think, played the least amount of 11 personnel with 3 receivers on the field. The team that played the most and played the least amount of 12 personnel with 1 back, 2 tight end is the Bills. So what did those two teams do? One team go gets a tight end, which makes you think they're going to play more 12. The other team go gets a receiver in round 1, which makes you think they're going to play more 11. So teams know this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. Terry McLaurin comes in at 19 on your list, Matt. Then we've got Keenan Allen at 20, Deebo Samuel 21, Drake London year 2 for the Atlanta Falcons at 22, and then Jerry Jeudy 23, DJ Moore 24, Amari Cooper to round out your top 25. And it's an interesting group of players there. A lot of boom or bust. Jerry Jeudy, what does it look like with a new system, new head coach? Tim Patrick, unfortunately, he's been one of the big injuries in camp, and it looks like he's going to be lost for the season before it starts. But that helps from a fantasy perspective for someone like Jerry Jeudy. Then you got DJ Moore with Justin Fields, and if you believe the sizzle reels out of Chicago, that's going to go very well for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, again, I mean, London, they don't throw the ball enough. Debo, there's so many mouths to feed, as you know better than anyone. Judy has really teased us, but has never really excelled. But no one noticed because Denver was so bad, and everyone was just blaming Russell Wilson for all the woes there. But when Judy, the last 5 or 6 games of the year, those two really clicked. So I think that's interesting. I am kind of believing the DJ Moore to the Bears stuff I'm reading and seeing, kind of like Ridley to the Jags. But they're going to run the ball a ton, and he's going to see a lot of doubles and things like that.
I feel like DJ Moore's production is going to be feast or famine. He's going to have some of those games where they hit some play action. Fields makes one of those elite throws, and he's getting open down the field, and he goes for 150 and a couple touchdowns. Then the next week he has 4 catches.
I can see that. And I'm not sure he's quite as good a player as Debo or McLaurin or Higgins, that I have ranked ahead of him. I like him. I just don't think he's quite as good as those guys.
Your guy, Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers at 26. And, this is an area of your drafts where there's still a lot of really good players after pick 25, just at wide receiver. Guys that could, in some games, and who knows, even for the season, give you wide receiver 1 production. A guy like Brandon Ayuk might end up surpassing Debo as the true outside wide receiver number 1, with Debo doing the wide back stuff. And but is the volume big enough? Deontay Johnson is the most highly targeted player there, even though there's other. You got, I mean, the one-handed catch I saw from camp. Did you get your eyes on him, by the way?
I was right there. Yeah, I was talking. I was on the air live. It was unbelievable. Him against Joey Porter Jr. Pickens was pretty special.
Yeah, I wonder what the talking point was. I saw the coach come over to him and was like, I wonder what the talking point is there. Don't let a guy go completely alien on you and catch a ball, even though your coverage is really good.
Yeah. And then they run over and they ran the same. Those two have been chirping each other all camp. Pickens is really, really nasty blocker, very competitive, maybe a little brash. And the young pup, Porter Jr.'s, similar size. Those two have been going at it like crazy in camp. It's been fun to watch. And
judging by Joey Porter Jr.'s dad, he's probably not going to back down from the fight.
He's real bashful either. Yeah. He had a quote after the Steelers drafted him saying, I patterned my game after my dad. I patterned my life after my mom.
I love it.
Like I was off the field, I want to be mom. On the field, I'm cool being dad.
That's fantastic. Okay. Some of the best sleepers, maybe some breakout wide receivers in your fantasy leagues next. Thanks everybody for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Make sure you are one. Subscribe up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And don't forget to get involved in our weekly mailbag Thursday episode. Hit us on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. Okay. We're not going to go through every one of the names on your list here, Matt. But after 25, Amari Cooper, it was Deontay Johnson, 26, Brandon Ayuk, 27, Michael Pittman, 28, Mike Williams, 29, Mike Evans, 30. This is about as low as Mike Evans has been on fantasy wide receiver rankings. And then a guy like DeAndre Hopkins right after him at 31, Chris Godwin as well. So that's an interesting group there because these are guys that, again,
I need your help with that.
They could be huge. They could be wide receiver 1s easy if they're healthy all season and get quarterback play.
Yeah, so I want your help on that, or if people want to send us a tweet tomorrow for Twitter Thursday, I'm all ears, because Evans at 30 and Godwin at 32 hurts my brain a little bit because these guys are good, they're healthy, they're always productive, but 70% of my cranium says, I'm just real happy not owning any Tampa Bay Bucks this year, and at this price, I won't get them. But am I selling those two too short? I mean, they're really good. And maybe they even get traded at the trade deadline and end up on Kansas City or something,
Well, this is when they do end up on your fantasy team, right? Because, maybe you'll running back early. And I like going wide receiver the next couple of rounds in this group of players. And you could have
in this neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So and we're all the way down to pick 32 right now. And, Hopkins is just hard because he's going to give you some big games, but, is going to be healthy all year. In what's that going to look like, and then Evans and Chris Godwin. We saw how it went last year, and this year they're changing things up at quarterback. It's just hard to know, but there's going to be value. I think with one of those guys, especially with chasing the upside and the hype with some wide receivers ahead of them.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I keep gradually moving those guys up just because they're so proven. Mike Evans could certainly outperform Michael Pittman or Deontay
Right.
Johnson. You know what I mean?
No doubt. How about, okay, so interesting. So we're not going to go player by player anymore here from 30, wherever we are, 33 on down. I think you've got 55 guys listed. Do you have any favorite breakouts, any favorite sleeper players in the rest of your group of wide receivers? Because I'm looking at names like Rashad Bateman. Could he be the true number one there for Lamar Jackson? But he's coming off injuries. And so like a player like that, where like, okay, this is where I'm shooting for the stars maybe, and maybe going a little more comfort, warm blanket with my earlier receivers, and then hoping I hit with the third guy too, and someone like Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm also struggling mightily with those 3 Ravens receivers. I mean, their ADP is very similar. Do you like strawberry, vanilla, or chocolate? You know, I mean, Odell could be the best, but I think Bateman is the best right now. And I loved Flowers coming out. And how much more are they really going to throw? So that's perplexing me at the moment. One guy I want to throw out is Brandon Cooks at 36. I mean, he by no means is he a sleeper, but no one goes, oh, or makes, you get mad when you put that sticker on the board. He's kind of like the Miller-Lite version of Tyler Lockett, but he just produces time and time again, and he's a good offense. I mean, he's to be singled all year long, and you can get him super cheap, So he's somebody I end up with a lot.
I can absolutely see that. There's a couple of year 2 guys. I think the addition of DeAndre Hopkins obviously hurts Treylon Burks, but he's someone that I think some people could be excited about. Those year 2 wide receivers, right? And then George Pickens, your guy. We talked about his highlight catch at camp at 39. Is the target share going to be there enough for George Pickens? Does he get open enough, or does he have to only win those 50-50 balls, because that'll really limit his fantasy production going forward? I
just don't know that answer. I mean, he's very, very impressive. I don't like how they coordinated him up. Way too many go balls, but you watch practice, they're having him do in breakers and slants and more high volume stuff. But I still think most likely at the end of the day, and this was the case last year, the pecking order goes Deontay, Freiermuth, Pickens. So if you're third in that offense, what's your ceiling? So that's just why I'm a little conservative on him. But I might eat those words because he's a very good player.
And the Steelers are running the football a lot, younger quarterback, and you're going to throw the ball to Najee Harris out of the backfield as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy along those lines, in terms of, I'm not excited about the offense, young quarterback, is at number 48, Nico Collins. I end up with this guy almost in every one of my fantasy drafts, in these best ball drafts, because you can get him really late. He's big. He has downfield ability. I think he's going to be the number 1 on that team. And that in itself, if you can get him as like the 48th, the 60th receiver off the board, I think has some value. I'm not saying he's going to be a wide receiver 1 or 2, but I think he'll be startable.
You know who I really like is the guy that's the last on your ranked list here at 55 amongst wide receivers. And that is Sky Moore, year 2 with Patrick Mahomes. Give me a piece of that Kansas City Chiefs offense.
I'm 100% with you. He keeps going up and up and up. It's hard to move up this board, though, because all these receivers are really good. There's so many of them. But I don't trust Kadarius Toney at all. I keep moving him down more and more. He's once again injured. So if Toney's there sometimes, not there sometimes, which always has been the case, and I didn't really love Rashee Rice all that much. I mean, Sky Moore can be the Chiefs' number 1 wide receiver. Now, that doesn't mean he's Tyreek Hill, but he can be, and that has immense value.
Huge value. Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I'm all over Sky Moore. And it's a post-hype sleeper price. And I would rather have Sky Moore than almost all the rookie wide receivers in this class, because as we know, rookie wide receivers can have a tough break-in in the NFL in their first seasons. And even my favorite receiver in the draft, Jackson Smith-Njigba, went into one of the worst situations as far as what his volume is projected to be in Seattle.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you when you said that was, would you take Sky Moore over JSN, over Zay, over Quentin Johnston, over Addison, like all those first-round rookies? I mean, do you like him more than that, even though he did very little as a rookie?
I'd probably take, it's tough with Jackson Smith-Njigba because, one injury and all of a sudden you could still put up a pretty good season.
I think that's true in LA too with Johnston.
Yeah. And so fantasy wise, 1 year, I'll probably take Sky Moore over all of them. because of the year 2 breakout potentially there, and especially since I can get him after those guys, probably.
I hear you.
You know, dynasty wise, I'm taking Jackson Smith-Njigba.
Sure.
But I still might take Sky Moore over Zay Flowers and Jaden Reed and Quentin Johnston, just because I don't think their draft status wasn't even that far apart. And I want to pair with the guy who could potentially be the wide receiver 1 for Mahomes. Although Quentin Johnston could be the wide receiver 1 for Herbert, which could be pretty nice for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Dynasty, Johnston's really attractive because Williams and Allen are immense cap hits next year. So he could even be the 1 there next year. But he does need an injury. Smith-Njigba needs an injury. Zay Flowers probably needs an injury, to be comfortable hitting that check box on Sunday morning to put him in your redraft league starting.
Right. And Jordan Addison, even at his best, you're going to get maybe the Devontae Smith treatment where there's another guy that's ahead of him in his own offense, and he's never going to be ahead of that guy.
And I also worry he might get the Pickens thing that we just mentioned in that it's Jefferson, Hawkinson, then Addison. So if he can't out-target Hawkinson, how much is left?
Right. So the landing spots weren't even that great for a couple of the top rookie wide receivers, even if you wanted to go that route. Interesting.
100%,
All right.
100%.
If you have more questions about Matt Williamson's fantasy rankings, hit him up at Williamson NFL on Twitter. I am at BD Peacock. Get involved in our Thursday mailbag tomorrow. And you can also drop a comment on YouTube and make sure you are subscribed up on YouTube. Hit the notifications so you know when we have a new show live, and find us everywhere you get your podcasts. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.